Gentlewoman from Pennsylvania reserves, and the gentleman from Mississippi is recognized.
I reserve as well at this time.
The gentlewoman from Pennsylvania is recognized.
I yield 1 minute to the gentleman from California, Representative Schiff.
And the gentleman from California is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, I rise in strong opposition to this resolution. First, as to the false pretext, 2 members of the Republican conference were removed from committees for inciting violence, encouraging violence against their colleagues. There is nothing at all at issue like that here. You want to introduce a resolution to condemn someone for inciting violence against their colleagues or against people here in Congress? Introduce a resolution against Donald J. Trump. No one has incited more violence against this chamber than Donald Trump. Now, let me talk about anti-Semitism. Do not insult our intelligence by suggesting this is about anti-Semitism. You want to introduce a resolution against someone guilty of anti-Semitism? Introduce a resolution against someone dining with anti-Semites, someone dining with white nationalists, members of your conference who are speaking at white nationalist rallies. Introduce a resolution against Donald J. Trump, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Paul Gosar, and others. But do not
The gentleman's time has
insult our
expired.
intelligence by saying this is about anti-Semitism.
The gentleman's time
Vote
has
no on this
expired.
resolution.
I thank the gentleman for yielding, and he is absolutely right. Let's consider an Attorney General of the United States, Bill Barr, intervening in specific criminal cases to help cover up for then-President Donald Trump, intervening in the sentencing of Roger Stone against the urging of the prosecutors on the case, unheard of since Watergate, intervening in the case against Michael Flynn to make the case go away completely, again, against the interests of the prosecutors in the case. The Durham investigation of the investigators, a complete bust, a complete waste of money and a bust. Now, my colleagues on the other side say their rules aren't stating a conclusion. Well, let's look at their rules. The rules say, let's look into the Justice Department's use of unprecedented and aggressive law enforcement tactics against political opponents of the Biden administration. Well, that certainly seems to suggest a conclusion, doesn't it? They're not saying the Biden administration or the Trump administration or any administration. No, they're only interested in one thing, in stating the conclusion they want to reach before they even begin an investigation.
Gentleman's
The rules say...
Gentleman's time is...
I yield back the balance of my time.
Okay. Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from California is recognized.
Thank you. Well, we can see now what the GOP has become. It's become the anti-ATF, anti-FBI, anti-law enforcement, pro-insurrection party. Mr. Director, I appreciate your being here. You have one of the toughest jobs in America. My colleagues on the other side of the aisle treat you like you're some kind of a mass shooter instead of someone trying to protect us from the epidemic of gun violence. And I want to recognize all of the volunteers from Moms Demand Action, and thank you for being here. Thank you for your advocacy around the nation. I appreciate how much you're devoted to trying to end this scourge of gun violence. I think like many Americans, that after the tragedy of Sandy Hook, it would finally be enough. Watching those beautiful children massacred would be finally enough to prompt this Congress to do something, to stop this insanity. But it didn't. Tragically, so many members of Congress learned a very different lesson, that they could just wait it out. They could wait out tragedy after tragedy after tragedy, and they would have to do nothing. And indeed, on the other side of the aisle, it's just gotten worse. It's just gotten worse. Whenever you see a disparity between what the American people want and what they get, there's usually a powerful special interest at work. And here, the American people desperately want an end to this epidemic. They want common sense gun safety legislation. They want a ban on assault weapons. They want truly universal background checks. It's insane that you can be denied the purchase of a weapon because you're a felon and then go out in the parking lot and buy the same gun. That is insane. And of course, we see the result when we see our children mowed down week after week after week. And it's not like there aren't answers to this. It's not like there aren't things that work. There are things that work, like a ban on assault weapons and a ban on high-capacity clips and Yes, it won't stop every shooting, it won't stop every mass shooting, but it'll stop a lot of them, and it'll make the ones that happen far less lethal. I mean, the GOP has become the party of wanting guns with more lethality, capable of killing more people, capable of killing more kids and more cops. Now, I'm sure they don't actually want cops and kids to die, but it's the effect of their actions, it's the effect of their inaction that people are dying. I mean, not even NRA members want this. And so why do they? Who benefits from this? Who benefits from this absurd, grotesque spectacle of mass shootings week after week and the daily trauma of people getting gunned down? Who benefits? Certainly not the American people. Well, the gun makers benefit. It's all about the money. Apparently, it's all about the money. Nothing else matters. I've been carrying a bill now for 6 or 8 years to repeal the immunity that the gun industry has. Because if it's all about the money, then the only thing that will stop the violence is to take away the money, take away the profit in murder. So I'm grateful to Moms Demand Action. I'm grateful for what you're doing out there. You're making a difference. If not in this building, you're making a difference in state capitals. I think you're going to make a difference in this building. We will get to a tipping point where we will show that we can beat the NRA, we can pass common sense reforms, and we can protect the public. You know, there has been a lot of progress, I think, on the Democratic side of the aisle of members running towards this issue, not away from it. But on the other side of the aisle, after that terrible shooting in Buffalo, for example, a year or two ago, when one of the Republican members said they could no longer in good conscience oppose an assault weapons ban, it was a few days later they were forced to announce that they would not run again because they were told basically that they would be drummed out of the party. And that has got to change. We're just going to see more Americans die from the lack of courage in this building. But I am just so fed up with getting up every day and seeing another city devastated, another town, another school known not for the beauty of its people, but for the deadliness of another tragedy. We've got to do better than this. I yield back.
Hi, Representative Adam Schiff here. Tonight, Donald Trump was indicted on federal charges. Let me see if I can break this down. We haven't seen the charges yet, but we understand, or it's being reported, that there are 7 charges against him. They likely involve his mishandling, his retention of classified information after leaving the presidency, and obstruction of the investigation, and that may be among the most serious charges. This is unprecedented. We've never had a former president charged like this, let alone someone who is the front runner in one of our 2 parties for the presidential nomination. We don't know how soon this will go to trial. It often takes months to get there, but this is a serious matter. It was serious in terms of the mishandling of classified information. Apparently, some of those documents were highly classified. When I was the chair of the Intelligence Committee, we were exceedingly careful not to bring any classified materials outside of that sensitive, compartmented facility where they're supposed to be kept. So it's a serious matter in its own right, obviously all the more serious that a former president is being charged. But here's the thing. The rule of law has to apply equally to everyone. If it doesn't, it's not a democracy. So this is an affirmation of our democracy, and yet our democracy will be put to the test. It already is, with Kevin McCarthy threatening to interfere, to use the power of the Congress to interfere in this prosecution. I'm going to be doing everything I can to resist that.
I yield to the distinguished gentleman from California, the former chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, Mr. Schiff, for as much time as he may consume.
The gentleman's recognized.
To my Republican colleagues who introduced this resolution, I thank you. You honor me with your enmity. You flatter me with this falsehood. You, who are the authors of a big lie about the last election, must condemn the truth tellers, and I stand proudly before you. Your words tell me that I have been effective in the defense of our democracy, and I am grateful. And yet this false and defamatory resolution comes at a considerable cost to the country and to the Congress. At a moment when millions of people in our home state of California are unable to find a place to live or afford a place to live, Speaker McCarthy chooses to occupy the resources of Congress for 2 straight weeks on this hollow sop to the MAGA crowd. He offers nothing to those who are homeless or addicted to opioids or to millions of college students mired in debt, but this paltry distraction. Donald Trump is under indictment for actions that jeopardize our national security, and McCarthy would spend the nation's time on petty political payback, thinking he can censure or fine Trump's opposition into submission. But I will not yield, not 1 inch. The cost to the Speaker's delinquency is high, but the cost to Congress of this frivolous and yet dangerous resolution may be even higher, as it represents another serious abuse of power. Donald Trump has threatened that any of you that defy him and vote against this partisan resolution will be met by a primary challenge. And he calls for my imprisonment. If a transient majority can punish and attempt to silence members who hold a corrupt president to account, there is no telling what further corruption of office will follow. And I say this to Speaker McCarthy and others who wish to gratify Donald Trump with this act of subservience or bend to his demands. Try as you might to expel me from Congress or silence me with a $16 million fine, you will not succeed. You might as well make it $160 million. You will never deter me from doing my duty. No matter how many false justifications or slanders you level against me, you but indict yourselves. As Liz Cheney said, there will come a day when Donald Trump is gone, but your dishonor will remain. This resolution attacks me for initiating an investigation into Trump campaign solicitation and acceptance of Russian help in the 2016 election, even though the investigation was first led not by me, but by a Republican chairman. It would hold that when you give internal campaign polling data and your polling data to a Russian intelligence operative, while Russian intelligence is helping your campaign, as Trump's campaign chairman did, that you must not call that collusion, though that is its proper name, as the country well knows. It would fine me for the costs of the critically important Mueller investigation into Trump's misconduct, even though the special counsel was appointed by Trump's own attorney general. It would reprimand me over a flawed FISA application as if I were its author or I was the director of the FBI, and over flaws only discovered years later and by the Inspector General, not Mr. Durham. In short, it would accuse me of omnipotence, the leader of some vast deep state conspiracy, and of course, it is nonsense. But here is the real gravamen of my offense. I led the first impeachment of Donald Trump for one of the most egregious presidential abuses of power in our history. And I led a trial which resulted in the first bipartisan vote to remove a president in history. And I would do so again. I warned that if Trump was not held accountable, he would go on to try to cheat in even worse ways in the next election, and he did, inciting a violent attack on this very Capitol. And after that, I participated in some of the most important hearings in congressional history, hearings that exposed Donald Trump's incitement of a dangerous insurrection to prevent the peaceful transfer of power. My colleagues, if there is cause for censure in this House, and there is, it should be directed at those in this body who sought to overturn a free and fair election. The question, my Republican colleagues, is not why am I the subject of this false resolution for doing my constitutional duty, but why are you not? Why are you not standing beside me, the subject of a similar rebuke for speaking the truth? Why did you not stand up to Donald Trump? Why did you not reject his immorality? Why did you not condemn his dishonesty? Why did you not speak out when his horde attacked this Capitol, or now when he treats the nation's secrets with such carelessness, lawlessness, and disdain? Why did you hide from efforts to hold him accountable? Why were you silent, afraid, unwilling to do your ethical, constitutional duty? Why did you cower? Why did you cower? And why do you still? Will it be said of you that you lack the courage to stand up to the most immoral, unlawful, and unethical president in history, but consoled yourselves by attacking those who did? Today, I wear this partisan vote as a badge of honor, knowing that I have lived my oath, knowing that I have done my duty to hold a dangerous and out-of-control president accountable, and knowing that I would do so again in a heartbeat if the circumstances should ever require it. I thank you, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Before going to the gentleman from California, the gentlelady from Texas has a unanimous consent, I think? Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent to submit records from the Department of Justice reflecting meetings with the U.S. Attorney John Durham. These records were in response to American Oversight's request for DOJ communications between the offices of the Attorney General and the Deputy Attorney General and the Durham or his first assistant. I ask unanimous consent to place this in the record of this hearing.
Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. Chairman, I have a unanimous consent.
Gentleman from
request.
California.
Mr. Chairman, you and your colleagues have continually cited to Steve DeUnio's transcribed interviews using selected statements taken out of context. I move for unanimous consent to enter the entire transcript into the record so the American public can see for itself exactly what he said.
Yeah, we will work on that. Yeah, we'll work on that. We don't want to, we'll talk with the chairman. We want to make that fully available.
Mr. Chairman,
For the
you're
ranking
objecting to a unanimous consent request then to something?
Mr. Chairman, I object.
Okay.
So if I understand correctly, Mr. Chairman, you're happy to cite selected portions of the transcript out of context, but you're not happy to see...
Mr. Chairman, there's an objection. Is there further action?
You don't want the American public to see this, Mr. Issa?
Roll call vote, please.
Yeah.
There's no vote on that.
I just want to clarify for the gentleman. We want to put the transcript out. There's a couple. We got a little work to do on certain names that have to be redacted for obvious reasons. But yeah, we definitely want to put the transcript out. We'll work with the minority to make sure that happens. I thought it was an amazing interview by Mr. D'Antuono, the former head of the Washington Field Office. We want that information out to the public, and we'll make sure it happens.
Can I suggest, Mr. Chairman, that you grant the request subject to redactions to protect personally private information?
So, without objection, so ordered.
Thank you very much.
Gentleman from California is
And you have accepted my submission. I didn't
did
hear.
that right away.
Thank you.
Away.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman from California is recognized.
Mr. Durham, many of...
Donald Trump just surrendered to authorities at a Fulton County jail. Let me see if I can break this down. So Trump had been indicted in Georgia for multiple felony counts of racketeering and conspiracy. These charges go to the heart of his efforts to overturn the election. They involve that phone call between Donald Trump and the Georgia Secretary of State, in which he demanded that the secretary fine 11,780 votes that didn't exist. Much of the evidence in the indictment comes from the special committee, the January 6th committee that I served on, and I led that hearing that produced a lot of that evidence that forms the basis of this indictment. Now, Trump is going to try to make a media spectacle out of this, but there was one area he didn't want the media involved in, even though he fought to get this arrest done in prime time, and that is he didn't want a mugshot. But the sheriff said there's going to be no special treatment here, and that's why we have this mugshot. He is going to continue to try to make a media circus out of the trial, but here's the thing. Inside the courtroom, it is not going to be reality TV. It's going to be the reality of the justice system, where he will be treated like any other defendant, and justice will be done.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from California for 5 minutes.
Welcome, Mr. Attorney General, and thank you for leading the department with such integrity. We meet today at a momentous time in our history. The country is about to go through a great trial. By this, I do not mean any of the several trials of the former president, but rather a trial of the proposition that we are a nation of laws, committed to the rule of law, and that no one is above the law. It is a proposition well known around the world because it is the one essential ingredient in all democracies. We have all professed our belief in this principle, but it has never been truly tested, not like it is today. In this committee, we are engaged in a portion of that trial. The chairman would abuse the power of this committee by trying to interfere in the prosecutions of Donald Trump, by trying to use the committee's power of subpoena to compel criminal discovery, in effect, making the committee a kind of criminal defense firm for the former president. In doing so, the chairman of this committee would establish a very different proposition. Through Mr. Jordan's actions, he would establish the principle that the rule of law should apply to almost everyone, just not the leader of his party. According to this alternate proposition, if you are the President of the United States and you lose your re-election, you can violate the law and Constitution to try to stay in power, and if you are successful, well then maybe you get to be president for life. And if you fail, there is no repercussion. This proposition is also well known to the world, and it is called dictatorship. Mr. Jordan hopes to camouflage his assault on the rule of law by falsely claiming that Donald Trump is the victim of unequal justice and Hunter Biden its beneficiary. It is a claim as transparently political as it is devoid of any factual basis. And it is cynical, based on the belief that the American people cannot discern fact from fiction. But I am betting on America. History has shown that those who bet against her are rarely successful, and more often, they end up covered with shame. I believe in the rule of law, and I thank you, Mr. Attorney General, for defending it. Let me now turn to some of the false claims asserted by the former president and some on this committee. On Sunday, the former president appeared on a national news Sunday program and was asked about 4 indictments and 91 counts facing him. His response was, Biden indictments. Excuse me, Biden political indictments. He said to the Attorney General, indict him. Mr. Attorney General, I want to give you a chance to respond. Was the president telling the truth, or was he lying when he said that President Biden told you to indict him?
No one has told me to indict, and in this case, the decision to indict was made by the special counsel.
So that statement the president made on Sunday was false?
I'm just going to say again that no one has told me who should be indicted in any matter like this, and the decision about indictment was made by Mr. Smith.
Let me ask you this question about the prosecution of Hunter Biden. The prosecutor in that case, Mr. Weiss, was appointed not by Joe Biden, but he was appointed in the first instance by Donald Trump. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And he was continued in that position, was he not?
He was continued in that position, yes.
And Mr. Attorney General, can you imagine the hue and cry you would hear from my colleagues on the other side of the aisle if you had removed him from that position? Can you imagine the claims that you had removed a prosecutor who was diligently investigating Hunter Biden? Can you imagine the outrage they would have expressed?
I can say that during my confirmation hearing, I discussed with many senators on that side of the aisle their desire and actual insistence that Mr. Weiss be continued to have responsibility for that matter. And I promised, and I said at my confirmation hearing, that he would be permitted to stay and that I would not interfere.
And Mr. Attorney General, that was exactly the right decision. That was the right decision to give the American people the confidence that even a prosecutor chosen by the former president would continue in the investigation into the son of the current president. That was exactly the right decision. Exactly the right decision, and my colleagues on the other side of the aisle would have been screaming if it were otherwise. But their attack on you is completely devoid of fact, of principle, but I appreciate you doing the right thing for the Department of Justice and, more importantly, the right thing for the American people. I yield back.
The meeting and the mood in there.
You know, I don't want to discuss internal caucus, but I can tell you my own view, which is Kevin McCarthy is not trustworthy. We don't trust him. Their own conference doesn't trust him. We've just lurched from crisis to crisis with him as Speaker, and they need to choose someone that has the ability to govern, because it's not him. And we don't feel that it's in the best interest of the country to have the House of Representatives continue to lurch from crisis to crisis. So I hope they can choose someone that has the capability of at least getting us into a more productive session in the House. But clearly it's not Kevin McCarthy.
So you predict that Kevin McCarthy will not be the Speaker by the end of today?
Well, I don't know where the Republican votes are, but it's certainly my feeling that Democrats should not enable such an untrustworthy partner as Kevin McCarthy.
Are you confident that Democrats will not save Kevin McCarthy?
Well, I know I'm going to vote against him. This is someone who voted to overturn the election. This is someone who reneged on the budget deal with the president. This is someone who betrays his word on pretty much a daily basis. That's not someone we ought to trust to run one of the most important institutions in the country. I'll be voting against him.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Last night, the House of Representatives voted to vacate the Speaker's chair and basically boot Kevin McCarthy out of the speakership. So what happens next? Donald Trump is offering to be Speaker. Is that even possible? Let me see if I can break this down. So Kevin McCarthy, in order to get the speakership in the first place, cut a deal with the most radical of his members where even a single member could bring a motion to vacate. Now, that doesn't mean that a single member could remove the Speaker, but he could force a vote, and Matt Gaetz did. Now, the reason Matt Gaetz called for this motion, sort of varies depending on when you listen to the guy. But basically, there was a group of about 10 or 20 very hard right Republicans who felt that McCarthy was conceding too much, and more fundamentally, that he just couldn't be trusted. And in fact, I think most of the Republicans felt there wasn't much trust in Kevin McCarthy. Certainly Democrats did. And there was no way that Democrats were going to come to the rescue of Kevin McCarthy. This was someone who made apologies for the January 6th insurrection. You might remember him going down to Mar-a-Lago to kiss the ring just a couple weeks after that attack on the Capitol. But also, this is someone who reneged on the deal with President Biden over the debt ceiling. This is someone who began an impeachment proceeding in order to placate the right wing, even with no evidence of wrongdoing on the part of the president. So no trust in him by Democrats. We were not about to save him. Where do we go from here? Well, you may have seen Trump has offered his services as Speaker of the House. Technically, they could do that. The Speaker doesn't have to be a member of the House of Representatives. Sounds crazy, but it's not a requirement. There is no way they're going to pick Donald Trump. And I say this because, although I have to admit, I've been proven wrong about this, I don't think they're that crazy. They're pretty crazy. I still don't think they're crazy enough to make Donald Trump Speaker. So what are they going to do? Well, Patrick McHenry is the acting Speaker pro tempore, and he is acting Speaker because he was on a secret list that Kevin McCarthy had. Now, he was number one on that list. Basically, if I were to lose my seat, this is who I would want to step in temporarily. That doesn't mean he was Kevin McCarthy's choice to be Speaker. It probably means that Kevin McCarthy really trusted Patrick McHenry, because if you're at the top of the replacement list, there's an incentive for you to push out the guy who's in the Speaker's chair. And you want someone very loyal in that. So I think all we can say with confidence is that Patrick McHenry has been very loyal to Kevin McCarthy. They're debating in the Republican conference who to replace McCarthy with. If they can't come up with someone right away, McHenry can serve in that role fairly indefinitely. But look, I hope they come up with someone that their members can trust, and that even if we have vehement policy disagreements with, at least we can trust that they will keep their word. That shouldn't be too much to ask. And what's more, it needs to be someone who can govern, someone who can run the House, so that we can begin to tackle some of these really important challenges the country faces, like the high cost of housing, like the fentanyl crisis, like the continuing plague of inflation. We need at least someone who has the ability to govern.